This is a story about connections. Connections between conservation and economic development, between a community's appearance and its quality of life, between the man-made environment and the natural environment, and perhaps most important of all, between people and the places they live. What is sense of place? First, it's what makes your hometown different from my hometown. Second, and perhaps more important, it's what makes our physical surroundings worth caring about. The real questions are not whether your town will grow, because it will, or whether it will change, because it will. The real questions are how. How will it change and how will it grow? Consider three things. Where do you put development? How do you arrange it? And what does it look like? So would you rather visit Franklin, Tennessee or Midfield, Alabama? Which one looks like a community with a sense of pride and a sense of place? Which one looks like a place you would rather spend time and money in? Every day, people make decisions about where to live, where to invest, where to vacation, and where to retire based on what our communities look like. The image of your community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. Think about visiting a new town or city, for instance. The more one community looks like every place else in America, the less reason there is to visit. On the other hand, the more a community does to enhance and preserve what makes it unique, the more reason there is to go there. That's because tourism is about seeking out those places in the world that are different, unusual, and unique. If every place was just like every place else, there'd be no reason to go anyplace. That's why the image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. In short, merchants and town centers are more successful because people spend more time on Main Street. In fact, the idea of a Main Street is the single hottest retailing concept in America today, a vision we abandoned 50 years ago. People are still drawn to these main streets because they're natural gathering places where you can enjoy a cup of coffee, read a magazine, meet your friends, or window shop. In addition, many communities are realizing why it's important to identify and preserve their historic buildings, neighborhoods, and landscapes, because they physically link us to our past, tell us who we are and where we came from. Preserving historic buildings is good for the heart and soul of a community, but it's also good for the pocketbook of a community. Some larger examples, such as the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas. This is one of the nation's leading tourist attractions and the basis of the city's billion-dollar tourism industry. What most visitors don't know, however, is that at one point the cities thought so little of this small river, they tried to put it underground into a culvert. In Seattle, Pike Place Market is the epitome of the city's working waterfront. Today, it is the single leading destination in Washington, visited by 11 million people a year. Yet less than 30 years ago, the city seriously suggested demolishing the Pike Place Market to create a parking lot in its place. You can have all the parking in the world, but if you have nothing to do, then why would you want to go there? First, we want a building that looks like it belongs in our community, and not just any place USA. Of course, the idea of community pride and place can apply to more than just buildings. Let's think about tourism again, with this ad out of an airline magazine. It says a chain of hotels should reflect the city they are located in. How can we create the sense of love and caring for our communities? One way is through education and interpretation. Every community has a story to describe these traditions through historic markers, interpretive displays, and public art. For example, this is the Chisholm Trail mural in Fort Worth, Texas, which tells the story of how cattle drives were so important to the founding of Fort Worth. And this is the family album of Tacoma Park, Maryland. Every one of these pictures is important to that town's history. Once, Spokane, Washington once manufactured the famous radio flyer wagons. What do they have there now? This piece of playground equipment, a piece of public art that physically connects people to their city's past. These are before and after pictures of the same place. Think about the images the signs project. Do you want the image of your community to be classy or trashy, tacky or plain, special or ordinary, ugly or beautiful? What exactly makes one community successful and another unsuccessful? Successful communities are good places to live, work, and invest because they do a few simple things. They make an inventory of their assets and create a vision for the future. They build all their plans, whether it's a tourism plan, an economic development plan, or a land use plan, around their assets. They use education, incentives, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulations. They pick and choose among developments, realizing not all development is created equal. They cooperate with resource managers for mutual benefit. They consider what a community looks like. They have a quality of life lobby. Let's look at these ideas in more detail. Successful communities look at what they have to offer and build their plans around their assets. Sometimes assets are obvious, such as those found in Boulder, Colorado, or Annapolis, Maryland, which has an obvious architectural legacy in a beautiful harbor. But sometimes these assets are not so obvious. Lowell, Massachusetts is an example. It was an industrial town of worn-out and abandoned mill buildings that used its architectural heritage to its advantage, creatively reusing the mill buildings for commercial space, museums, and housing. Successful communities use education, incentives, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulation. The town of Pella, Iowa, for instance, gives new developers a handbook about why the architectural character of that town is important. They do this because they want new franchises, chain stores, and big box retailers to fit in. Successful communities also consider what they look like. The cover of the Vermont State Tourist Brochure boasts that there are no billboards in the state. Why? Vermont is one of the 5 heavily tourism-dependent states that have removed all their billboards because they found that it is one of the most important things they can do to strengthen the tourism industry. Petersburg, Virginia, on the other hand, could have been the Williamsburg of the Civil War, but it's not, because they didn't pay any attention to what they look like. So what do you want your community to look like in 20 years? If you don't ask that question, it'll end up looking like any place USA. You see, there are really only 2 kinds of change in America: unplanned change or planned change. Failing to plan simply means planning to fail. Finally, let's think about the social and psychological value of the ideas presented today. Why is it that people feel a sense of loss, like losing a loved one or a friend when a grove of trees is cut down, an historic building demolished, or a scenic view obliterated? It's not because we can't plant new trees or build new buildings. It's because our sense of identity is tied in a very profound way to special buildings, places, and views. Each has a rich symbolic importance, which contributes to our sense of identity and well-being. In fact, long ago, an ancient Roman statesman said, "Our communities can grow without destroying the things that people love." The landscapes of our states and regions, the countryside, the cities and the small towns are worth preserving not just because they're fragile and beautiful and rich in cultural and natural resources, but because they help us define who we are as a nation.